Hello, my name is Jack Burgess. This time I want to talk about tools. I've talked about power tools before. I love good tools. And I want to first mention a disclaimer. I've written a number of articles on hand tools, individual hand tool articles, and at the end of every single one of them I have a disclaimer. I love good tools and I don't hesitate to spend money on them. So keep that in mind. Not all of my tools cost a lot of money. Some of them are really very cheap. But what I really want to talk about is good tools. There are some places that sell tools that are made who knows where. And you start using them and you realize they're not doing the job. So there is a handout. I've done handouts when I do in-person clinics. There is a handout on my website. My website is www.yosemitevalleyrr.com. And when you go online there's one of the choices is clinics. This handout is the very first one. It's a long handout and it lists the link to buy every single tool I'm going to talk about. And some of those links are really long. Some are just Amazon. Some of them are links that it took me a day to find out where I purchased this tool. I know I've bought some tools that are no longer available from that same supplier, so forth. So there's a handout. It's worth getting if you really decide you want to start purchasing some of these tools. The links will also be available in the video description below. The very first tool I want to talk about is tweezers. I purchased these tweezers about 40 years ago. There was no internet. I live in the Bay Area, and there was a jewelry outlet in Oakland, about 30 minutes away. You had to have their catalog in order to be able to buy something, and these were $35. I couldn't believe I was spending that much money. But a friend of mine had the same one, and I've now had them for 40 years, so that's $1 a year. That's a pretty cheap tool. In the article I wrote about these tweezers, I mentioned they were stainless steel, and so in the handout I mentioned stainless steel. And recently, last couple of days, I've been thinking about that, and I finally realized what I purchased was not stainless steel. The other choice is carbon steel. It is not as strong, so forth, and it's also magnetic. And what happens is, which gets me frustrated, is say I'm getting ready to work with some brass wire, and I'm going to solder it. So I take some steel wool, clean it, and pretty soon I've got all these little pieces of steel wool on my tweezers. And it's very frustrating. I even bought a tool to demagnetize the tweezers. It doesn't work. So I actually ordered new tweezers yesterday from the source that's in the link. And I should have those in a couple of weeks. And I will be able to retire these. If I didn't get new tweezers, these things would be still with me for another 20 years. Unless you drop them, bend them. I remember several decades ago, I actually dropped my tweezers and they stuck in my thigh vertically. I didn't leave them there, but you have to be careful with them. These tweezers were manufactured by Vigor of Switzerland. When I bought them, it was just Vigor. They have now merged with Pure Vigor, and that's what you would be buying today. These tweezers cost $38.70, but they are really worth it. So I want to demonstrate one of the things I can do with these tweezers. This is one of 3 cabooses I'm building right now. They were used on the Yosemite Valley Railroad real early, so I'm building them as a standalone display model. They're never going to run. But all of the grab irons have nut washer castings, so here's how I do that. So I slice off just the nut bolt washer, and you lay it down really carefully so it stays with at the top, and then you use the tweezers to pick it up, place it on the model, and glue it in place. So, can your tweezers do that? Next tool I want to talk about is X-Acto knives. I'm using that as a generic term. I don't know if I even have any X-Acto knives anymore. I have 2 of these knives, which I think are Excel knives. They won't roll off the table because of this little thing here. I'm not sure that X-Acto knives have that feature, but it doesn't make any difference. They're all about the same. These guys cost about $7 a piece. What I do recommend though is whatever brand you get, buy 100 blades. What you don't want to do is be using a blade that the tip is bent or broken because you don't have a spare and you can't get to the hardware store. So I buy these a pack of 100 at a time, and I go through them. I'm changing out blades all the time. If I'm cutting styrene especially and it doesn't seem that it's cutting like it should, the blade's it's not sharp anymore. Get rid of the blade, put a new blade in. I also use a scalpel. In the very first video I did, I'm talking about being more efficient and putting tools away, and I'm showing my workbench and so forth. And I pulled this out and I said, I don't know what I even have it for. I might as well just throw it away. I've been using it a lot more to cut styrene, especially if I'm cutting down a V-groove. The blade is much thinner, and so there might be situations where that's effective. I don't remember where I bought it, how much it was. One thing that's very interesting is this is a number 11 blade, which is the same number as surgeons have been using for a long time. So what X-Acto did is they went to surgery instruments, at least this blade, and copied the blade, and that's the number 11. So if you've ever wondered, why didn't they start with number 1 or A? They jumped to 11, that's why. It was a scalpel blade. Next up are needle files. This is one of them. I have a set of 6 of these. I don't remember where I bought them. I bought them a long time ago, but I did find a similar set of quality needle files at Rio Grande's Jewelry Supply. I purchased several things from them. These are good files. Remember that the higher the number, the finer the coarseness. You notice I have dots on it. I've actually worn off 1 dot. This one used to have 3 dots. This is the one that I use the most. This is the finest of the 3 regular flat files. I also have a half round, triangle, so forth. You notice I have rubber grips on these files, which I really like. They don't come that way. I did find the source of these, which is in the handout, and it was for some really cheap files, but they had the little thing on here, cost $10. I would buy those cheap ones, throw them away, and use these grips. I really like these grips. They make it a lot easier to use the files. I also have quite a few of these very small files. You can find them in a number of places, and they tend to be reasonable quality. It's not something you're using all the time. It's when you have a hole, you just need to get in real tight and so forth. So the quality isn't such an issue with those. I also have a couple bastard files. I don't know why I bought 2, but sometimes I go into a hardware store and I just want to buy tools. I use these fairly often. If I'm working on a piece of brass and I need to get it squared down, that you want to use something big. You don't want to use a little file like one of these. These are, hardware store carries these, no problem finding those. I also have a set of 10 Riffler files. You can see I've used this one, but I rarely use them. If I were you, I would get one, probably like this shape, where you need to get in and file something that you can't reach. But otherwise, don't spend your money on a set of 10. The other ones, I don't know if I ever used them. Okay, now I want to talk about pin vises. This is the pin vise I originally bought. It's fairly common. You can buy them at Walter's, other places. It has a situation where if you're changing bits, you might have to take it apart and turn it around and so forth. So I read a suggestion decades ago that taking this thing apart, just when you change drills is a pain in the rear. So you buy 3 of them, and that way you can have all the ones you want. That seemed like a great idea, except these are not quality instruments. They just don't work that well. They have a hard time getting down to number 80 drills. They're kind of expensive, compared to this. This is cheaper than this. This is 1,000 times better. Push this up just about to the point where this will go in. Slide it in, push it up, and I try to give it a little twist. That is locked in. If you want to not have so much of the bit showing. So this will work with number 80s all the way up to probably number 70s. It is a really good pin vise. Another advantage is when you're working with a very small drill bit, you don't want a real heavy tool because you're going to break it. So this one, you just sit there and away it goes. The company that I originally purchased this from no longer carries them, but Rio Grande Jewelry Supply does. And I should point out that a lot of these tools, if a jeweler is using it to make money, he's going to want quality tools. He doesn't want tools that are broken or sloppy or whatever. So this is $9.99 for a really good pin vise. Now let's talk about drill bits. I started buying drill bits online a long time ago, and some were okay. I got some that the tips had been broken off. They had not been ground to a point. And so I emailed the seller and told him I was frustrated with him and so forth, wanted my money back. And he did that. He didn't ask for them back, which means he knew that they were not quality drill bits. Since then, I have been buying my drill bits from Drill Bit City. There is a link in the handout. In fact, 2 links. They have a website. I've been buying drill bits from them for a long time, and but their website's kind of hard to find. So there's a link to just these drill bits. What I do is I buy packs of them, 6 blades, which is $10 or so, and I always have a supply because these guys break. They never get dull. You break them before they get dull. And I don't want to be working on a project and I need a number 79 and I break the number 79. So do I use a 78 and the joint becomes sloppy? No, I have a whole bunch of spares. I also encourage you to get a drill gauge. This one is for 61 through number 80s. The reason is that even if you have dial calipers, measuring a drill bit with calipers is not the way to do it. It is not that accurate. So what you really need to do is get one of these guys. They're about $14. This is the only one that I found for these small ones. This is a general. I have a link to it. The way to measure a drill bit is put it through a hole, then start going down to smaller holes. When you finally get to the one that it goes through, and the next one it doesn't, the size is the one that it will not go through. It is not the one that it slides directly through. What I tend to do is I will pull out one drill bit at a time and put it back and not try to have 2 of them out at the same time. If I have a number 80 and a number 79 out, which one goes where? So this is the only way to find out. Now I want to talk about the drill bit case. You can buy this at Micromart, Walters and so forth. But I have a case, and what happens is pretty soon this will slide back and forth on its own. And then you're ready to put a drill bit back in, especially the small ones. It's on the wrong slot. Next time you say, oh, now I've got 2 in that slot, which one goes there? So that's when I swap it out. I just did, like I mentioned, I just did that a few days ago. First thing you do is cut off this little thing that you're supposed to hang this from the wall. And I added this. This is in the handout, full size. You can cut it out and stick it on. I don't go by drill bit numbers. If I actually have instructions, say I'm building a kit and says use a number 78 drill bit and do this, I don't use that. I measure either the hole or what I'm supposed to go into the hole and pick a drill bit by the size. So that's why I want this on my drill bit case. What I've done on this one, I'm getting better, my old one I had taped it on, is I printed this on sticker paper like this. This, you print on it, cut it out, peel the back off, and it sticks right on. Makes a very nice way to attach this. And the paper is good quality paper, so you're not going to eventually rub it off. This stuff has other uses. Here you see I've cut off, in fact it was the one that I cut this off. I made another group so I can run this through the printer again. Say you've got a drawing and it shows all the grab irons, and you have to put individual grab irons on the side of a car you're building. Print that on this, cut it a little wide or cut it to size, stick it on the styrene, drill right through the paper, cut the paper off, and you've got all your holes. So this stuff has a lot of uses. Once you get it, you start thinking, oh, I could use that. So this is on the handout also. It's fairly cheap. I have a bunch of pliers, all of them made by Xeron in the United States, in Maine. They're all quality tools. So this is the one I use the most often. You can see how dirty the handles are. This is a tweezer nose. It's 2 flat noses. Good weight. They're 4 inches long or so. The next one I use the most often is this one. It's a flat nose. Both sides are flat and kind of wide. So I've actually used this to take brass wire and just kind of work along and straighten it out if it has a curl in it, for example. This one is 1 round tip and 1 flat tip. I don't know why you really don't need 2 round tips. If you're going to make a turn in a piece of wire, one side needs to hold it and the other side you go around. So all of these are about 13 to 17 bucks and so forth. I use this one, the round nose, if I need to make a piece of brass wire and bend it into a scale 12-inch curve. Take a piece of brass tubing, put it over it, and then just bend it right around the tubing. Okay, these are actually scissors, and they call them scissors. They're really set up to cut photo etch brass parts out, and they do a good job of that. Now I'm going to talk about flush cutters. This is also from Xeron. These are pretty good. I also have these. This was an expensive tool. These are from Rio Grande Jewelry Supply. This was $60. They're a little bit too big. I wish this is a 5-inch. I wish I would have bought a 4-inch. One thing you've got to remember on flush cutters is you cannot cut hard brass or steel or anything. These are really meant for small diameter brass and so forth. These I love, and this is what I use in lieu of those other two. Very, very small, and if you're going to cut brass wire, this is overkill. This is perfect. A lot of times I will cut brass with irregular cutters, but I want a flush cut on one tip of it, and then so I'll go in and cut it with this. The problem with this is I can't find them online. I think what happened is I know the owner of PBL, and I bought some tools. I bought a soldering machine from him and so forth, and I've met him in person. And I think he made a huge order of stuff he was going to sell online, and he got one of these. He doesn't sell them on his website. He gave this to me for free. And it has a marking on the back. I've searched the internet and I can't find it. So, sorry to report a tool that I love that you can't have, but that's the way it goes. These you can buy on PBL. PBL calls these gate nippers. I bought these some time ago. They had 3 sizes. I bought all 3. Now they have 2 sizes and they don't sell these anymore. But these are a really good tool, and another tool that if you're going to buy it, you want to buy a good one. So let me show you how they work. As you notice, I want to cut this little part out. The blade goes right between the part and the sprue. and done. You can also, if you cut something with a little bit left on it, a little bit of the sprue left, this is a good one to just go in and nibble off that sprue that you don't want. Here's a tool you probably haven't thought about, but this is $5.49 from Staples. What it is a drafting pencil, and it's got 0.5 millimeter lead, very, very fine lead. To retract it, you just push the tab in and push it back in. What I use this for is, for example, maybe I'll make a prick point on something that I've got to drill a hole. I will draw a little circle around it. You're talking about very small lead, and especially if you go prick and then you come back or you drill the hole in the wrong spot. So I use this quite a bit. You can also, and I don't do it as often, make a prick point and then stick the point in it and make that hole a little darker. So it comes with lead for that price. I buy extra lead. I probably bought this 40 years ago. I still haven't gone through it. So this is a very high quality tool. This is what an engineer would use, for example. So it's worth having something like that. The next tool I want to talk about is a drafting compass. You've probably never even seen them unless you had a drafting class sometime in your life. That is where I got these. When I was in high school, I took a drafting class. We had to have certain tools, and this was one of them. So I've had this compass for 60 years now, the oldest tool that I own. The other day I had a project, still working on these cabooses, that I used them, and let me show you what I did. I needed to add sill steps to all four corners of these cabooses that I'm working on. And here's the part. And it has tabs that you need to drill a hole so this can be attached. And I was trying to figure out how am I going to transfer the width of those two tabs onto the model. So what I did is I took my compass, cranked it down so I could actually measure the distance between where I need those holes, and then I could transfer that to the car. I also needed to make sure that the sill step was going to be correct as far as how it's in what position here. So what I did is I took these, after I measured it, took some styrene, made a couple holes, drilled those holes out, took one of the parts, made sure the holes were the right distance apart, and they were. Then I took that same piece of styrene and held it up to the model to figure out how far up and down those holes needed to be. Cut that off, and then I had a little template that I could just go around, hold it there, drill, drill, hold it here, drill, drill. So that worked out really well. I don't know how else I would have done it, and I don't know how I've done it before, but the compass really worked out good for that. These are about $10. If this is the kind of situation where you can say, oh, I could have used them in that case, that would be a worthwhile investment. I suspect a lot of modelers, if you need to tap a hole to put a screw to hold the trucks onto a boxcar, for example, will just take the screw and screw it in. That works sometimes. I've had a situation where I did that and it didn't work. I had to throw the model away because the screw was cockeyed. The proper way to do it is use a tap. There's only 2 or 3 taps that we would need. This is a 256. I buy these from Drill Bit City. They sell them. I've mentioned Drill Bit City before. They really have good quality tools, drill bits and taps and things like that. That's what they sell. So you can get these a lot of other places. I'm not sure you can get ones this small in a hardware store, but Drill Bit City has them. And they're about $5 a piece. You also need a way to hold this, and these are T-handle tap wrenches. You can have one and just change out your taps. Of course, I have 2. These are about $15 a piece. Again, I have them marked. This 2 dots, this is a 256, this is 3 dots, this is a 348. One thing I want to mention is if you go online, you can find a chart which will tell you what size hole to drill first for what size drill bit. Those charts are set up for steel. And so what I do is typically for styrene, for example, I will pick a drill bit which is a little smaller so that the threads have a little more meat. Usually resin, I can make them a little bit bigger, but styrene especially, you need to have your starter hole small. So basically what you're doing is you need to have this thing perpendicular to the surface and make sure that when you go in, you're going straight in. If you're a little cockeyed, it's not going to work. Now this is a tool that I bought a long time ago that was used to make rivets in styrene or metal or whatever. We don't do that anymore because now there's resin rivets, and those are much easier and do a better job. But if you have one of these, there is an adapter that will turn it into a tap machine. So you put your tap in here, and then you can put your thing down here and just slowly turn it, and you'll be tapping straight on. This is about 40 bucks. If you don't already have it as a riveter, you're looking at $109. That's a lot of money. I wouldn't do it for that, but it's something to think about. If you build a lot of resin kits and you tap a lot of holes, it would be worthwhile to make sure that they're all straight. If you do any scratch building, you probably already have a chopper. This is a chopper. It's a really nice tool. Lets you chop a bunch of pieces of styrene or wood the same length. One thing that always frustrated me was the stop on this side was controlled by one of these guys. And it takes 2 hands. One hand to keep this tab part in line and so forth. So what I did is I replaced it with one of these. This is a part you can get from part supplies, so forth, and that really made a difference. You know, and a new stop also. You can just move it exactly where you want, and it's done. So if you do have a chopper, give some thought to doing this. I did an article for Model Railroad Hobbyists on modifications I did to my chopper, and I think the outline has a link to that. I also built another chopper, this one, and you would wonder, why would I want a chopper that doesn't even have a stop on it? A lot of times I'm building something, I want a piece of styrene that's got a square cut, but I don't care how long it is. This I can put right on my workbench, right next to everything else, cut a piece, glue it on, whatever. So this is just a piece of, this is not styrene, this is some plastic, hard plastic. And you can buy this as a separate tool from Northwest Shortline. Then I built this guy. This is for doing really long pieces. I know where I got this. I don't know where you could buy one. Several decades ago, a guy that I didn't know sent me his prototype, I guess, of a chopper that would do both straight cuts and angled cuts. And it was a big machine. It was probably this big. And I tried it out, and that was the problem, was I didn't have enough workbench to hold it. But otherwise, his concepts were good. And so what I kept parts of it. And this is the part off of it. So this is a real easy stop, chop, chop, put it where you want it, and so forth. So this works out really well for chopping long pieces of wood. Say I'm going to build a long bridge, wood trestle, and you need all the stringers for that. This is a way to do it. Now, one problem with this is it's a big piece of styrene, but if you look real careful, it's got a warp in it. So getting the cut to actually cut sometimes takes this. I don't use it that much. I don't know if I would build another one today, but it's something you could think about. Coping saws. I had the traditional coping saw for a long time that you buy at any place, and it was always frustrating. It was very hard to get the saw blade in get it tensioned correctly and so forth. And so probably 2 decades ago, I was frustrated enough, I went online looking for an alternative, and I found these. These are made in California, over by Santa Cruz. This one is $79, and what it does, first of all, it's really nicely done. This is all laser cut metal, but this little part here comes over. When you need to replace the blade, once you've got your tension set, you put the blade in, lock it in, put this back over, and that's the same tension you had before you change the blades out. That is a smart solution. He sells these online. I checked just the other day, and he had distributors all over the United States. One of them is Fast Tracks. I did an article on this. That guy, the owner of that company, emailed me and said, Jack, I want to sell those through my website. Would you do a promotion for them? And I said, sure. I will definitely promote them because I think they're a fantastic saw. And I said, what would you like me to say? And he said, well, how about if you said this? I said, that sounds good. I'll sign it. And I checked the other day, and it's still up. So Fast Tracks does sell them as another possibility, but it's a really good coping saw. And the reason Fast Tracks does it is if you are cutting gaps in your rail, if you cut that too wide, you can have problems with derailments. This was going to give you a very narrow slot, but it will do the job. Now I want to talk about calipers. I purchased this caliper in 1970 or so, late 70s. It's not digital. That's all they had at the time, but it's just as accurate as things you get today. And I used it for a long time. Then the company started coming out with $20 calipers, digital. And I bought a 4-inch, and then I bought a 6-inch. And then the 4-inch died, and then the 6-inch wouldn't turn off. And I thought by then I should be able to buy a good calipers. So I bought this one. I actually emailed a person I know whose company manufactures styrene freight car kits and asked him his recommendation. And he suggested this exact one. This is a Mitutoyo caliper. It's a 4-inch caliper. Sometimes it's not quite long enough, and in those cases I go back and use this one. But 99% of the time it's fine. It reads out to 4 places. You can reset the 0 if you have that problem. It'll measure in millimeters or inches. And it's just smooth action. The first ones I bought, I remember another problem I had is they would eat batteries. If I used it and left it turned on for an hour, it ate up the battery. This one, I've left it overnight. I come in, and forgot to turn it off. I've maybe changed batteries twice in the 20 years I've had it. So this is one instrument. If you're going to buy calipers, don't buy the cheap ones. They're not worth the money. Buy a good one. This is $120. You can actually buy it through Amazon. So if you're an Amazon Prime, you won't pay shipping costs. So it's a good caliper. I use it all the time. I have a piece of brass laying there. All right, which envelope did it come out? Is it 15 thousandths brass or is it 20 thousandths brass? There's my answer. Don't measure drill bits with it because I told you how to do that. But styrene. Yeah, I'm to the point now where I can handle styrene and say this is 20,000, this is 10, but I can't measure 15,000 styrene with my fingers. So I use it a lot, all kinds of situations where I want to measure something and so forth. So if you're going to buy calipers, buy good ones. Okay, this is a tool that I suspect you've never even heard of before. I don't remember how I learned about it, but I do use it quite a bit. It's called a bench stone, and on this particular one, there's 2 grits. These are actually the coarsest grits. These are made for jewelers, but they're only sold by the company that makes them. And so I have that link, and I have the information you need to be able to buy this one. what I do on it, say I'm cutting a piece of styrene that's got to fit into a hole. And it's just a little, it's square on all four sides, but it's just a little too big. Test it now. And what you're doing is you're filing it down, but you can't, if you use a file, it's not going to stay square. This one is just, and what this is that is steel that has a grit on it, and it hasn't worn out. I don't even know which side I use anymore, but you can see it does a good job. It does exactly what you need when you need to make something a little bit smaller to make it fit something. These things cost about 85 bucks a piece, so they're not cheap, but if you're doing scratch building, things like that, they work really well. And because a lot of times what I will end up doing is cutting a piece of styrene, and there's three choices. One, you can make it a little large, you can try to make it exactly what you want, or you can accidentally make it too small and you're throwing it away. So I tend to make them a little, just a touch large, and then use this to get it down to the size I need. So, expensive tool, but I use it quite often. For a long time I had an X-Acto third hand where it has two things coming in. It wasn't very satisfactory. Then I found this guy. This is got a lot of tension, and you can actually adjust the tension. It goes in any way you want. And I found a lot of uses for it. These guys cost about 70 bucks a piece, but it's a very, very heavy base on it. And I've used it where I need to hold something down and solder it. I'll show you a couple photos. This one shows working on one of those cabooses, and what I had done is glued the lower handbrake part, which is gray, in place on the insill, and I built the railings from brass. Now what I needed to do was solder a little small piece of brass with a hole through it where the brake wheel would go through. So I need to have the brake wheel being plumb, straight up and down, when I solder that little tab. And so you can see I've reached in there with a toothpick to hold the brake wheel exactly where I want it, and then I reached in and soldered the little piece of brass to it. So that's the kind of things I do on it. Here's another one. Apparently an operator, without telling me, broke off a yard limit sign and broke it off right at grade. The yard limit sign is wood, so I could either start all over or dig a new hole and everything, but I added some white glue to the broke off piece that was in the scenery, held this up plumb and square, came back an hour later, and it's all done. So these have quite a few uses. Once you get one, you'll find a number of times where it's useful. This is a Coffman clamp. When they first came out, I realized how valuable it was going to be, so I bought a couple of them. Here's basically what I use them for most of the time. You're putting together a resin kit, and you need to hold the side and the end in alignment, perpendicular to each other, and with the tops or the bottoms even, whatever. So you get it in the clamp, move it around until you check it and you say, yep, that's exactly what I want. And then you add CA on the inside. What you need to do is make sure that it doesn't run under here. So what I do is I put a couple of drops, and when that dries, then I'll move the clamp and so forth. One problem I was having is that with these little foam things, they would attract CA. And so what I did is I took another one and modified it and put wood in here. CA will not glue wood together. And so if you clamp something together, I don't have to worry about the clamp being glued to the product. I also bought this one. I don't even remember buying it. This would be a good one if I was building buildings, but I don't have any more buildings to build. But so they make them in different sizes and so forth. you could probably get by with just one of these. I buy two so I can sit, if I'm building a boxcar, I have one setting these two and another one getting these two all set. I'm a very impatient person. You know, I could do one at a time, but I'm sure that's why I bought two of them, is to be able to do them like that. So they're about 25 bucks a piece. So these are Machinist Squares. I've got a 6-inch and a 4-inch. I use the 6-inch not that often. I use the 4-inch a lot. Building a building, I want to make the building square. You want to make the walls so they're vertical. So Amazon has these. You can buy cheaper ones. I found one for maybe 15. It looked cheap. Looked like it had been made in some third world country. Amazon has one, not the exact same brand, but it's $22 and it looks like a high quality tool. That's what you want. This is your basic pen vise. This is one that has a rubber thing that lets you attach it to your workbench if you have surface like this. I move it around a lot, so I don't want one that screws in. This is replaceable. You don't have to buy a whole new vise when this is not holding anymore. So it tilts and everything. These are about 80 bucks. I don't use it a whole lot, but I typically use it a lot if I've got a piece of brass that I'm filing with a big, one of those bastard files, that kind of thing. Oh. Okay, this is another vise, a very small vise. This is from Proxxon. I use this quite a bit. It's really heavy. The current ones don't look quite like this. I really like this one. It has a groove on the side so you can hold tubing and so forth. What I've been using it for just recently, again working on these cabooses, is I have a piece of plywood. I will run screws through up and hold the car here, tip this, and now I can work on the end of the car. I can put decals on the end of the car, so forth. So this the first time I've ever done this was on these cabooses, and that worked out well. But I also use this when I'm holding things I need to solder or whatever. So these guys are about 20 bucks. If I had to pick one of the two, I would pick this one over the more expensive big one if I had to have only one of them. So the last thing I'm going to talk about are simple, quick things. Razor blades. I use a lot of razor blades. Even though I have an X-Acto knife, I use it if I'm going to chop something to length instead of trying to force it. And again, I buy them by the 100 so that I can use them and not keep using them when they're dull. Round toothpicks. I use a lot of round toothpicks. I mix up a lot of epoxies, two-part epoxies. I'll take one toothpick, put the epoxy on a piece of aluminum foil, mix it up there, take a clean toothpick and apply it to the model where I want it. I'll do the same thing with canopy glue. I'll put a dab on a piece of aluminum foil, apply it with a toothpick. To buy these, I was looking in grocery stores for them. Those toothpicks typically are the red and green ones for cakes or whatever. These are 800 toothpicks for 5 bucks. When I bought them from Amazon, I bought 3 boxes. I've already gone through 1 box. I'm on my 2nd box. And then these brushes, I find I use these quite a bit. I've got 2 different sizes. I have a little dispenser so I can pick them up. Sometimes I will use them to add CA to a part that's inside so where I can't get to, or I can't drip it on. I'll dip the brush in CA and then apply it. So I use them to clean some stuff off. I don't use them to paint or anything like that. But I found these to be fairly cheap, and I use them quite a bit. Hope you learned about some new tools or some better tools. I hope it doesn't cost you so much money that you can't afford them. But if your hobby is building things, then having the right tool and a good tool really makes that process more enjoyable. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next time. So we talked about If he had not laughed, I would have kept on going.
It's my fault.
Okay, we're good now. Gotta stop saying.